Question for you, dear listener. Do you read the privacy policy of your favorite AI tool, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot? There's so many these days, right? But do you know what these policies actually say? And how do they compare? Does one AI tool do a better job than others, or are they just all bad? Scott is going to lead a conversation today about this very important topic.
I'm leading this one? Oh,
you are leading it. That's right. And look who's here. My co-host lead, Mr. Scott Wright.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have Kevin, because I know he's got pretty passionate views about privacy, and this is
I know.
key
I am
topic.
a little disappointed, but
Yeah.
I know he's preparing for ShmooCon this weekend, the last ShmooCon. Unfortunately, I could not make it this year due to some other commitments this weekend, but maybe we'll have to have another episode talking about ShmooCon, because Kevin and I go way back.
Yeah, I know. And I've never been. And if there's never going to be another one, then that's too bad. Yeah.
I was going to say it is in Washington, D.C., where this conference is. And Scott, I hear you're going to be the next state.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that, actually.
So your prime minister resigned. There's all kinds of stuff going on right now. Yeah. Now's the perfect time.
Yeah, it seems like it. Might as well just throw in the towel.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff going on in this world. But and AI is a big part of the craziness that's going on in this world, I think.
It is. So. Yeah. I resisted for a long time, wading into the murk and all the different hype on different things. But I think it's time we talk about AI.
And we've been talking about it on our episodes here and there, and we've given you, I think, our thoughts on, we obviously are proponents of AI. We're using it. We'll talk a little bit about that in terms of privacy policies, but I don't think it's something to necessarily fear. But I think when we're talking about, like, when you're putting your data into these AI systems, I think we have to talk about what they do with that data, how they protect it, and they all have varying levels of, depending on their policy, what they actually do with that data.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a bittersweet thing for me, because I think I've mentioned in a couple of our episodes, I'm not all that positive about where things are likely to go with AI in the long-term big picture. I think one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit today is the CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodai, who's a really interesting guy. And there is that podcast that I mentioned. It was Lex Friedman. He's a tech videographer, video blogger, and he gets into some really serious, deep stuff. And I think it wasn't from that podcast, but it was from something I heard somewhere else that Dario had said, if we don't get the guardrails right by the end of 2025, we're in big trouble. And from the point of view of the type of risks that not a lot of people are really talking about, it's not AI overlords so much as like the hype and FUD, but it's that we could be just giving too much control in a way that we end up not really knowing how to actually govern ourselves. And it's part of the technology itself, the way AI works. And Dario describes that in the podcast with Lex Friedman, that it's really hard to control a single aspect of how something is output from an AI engine, right? It's very vague. It's got a lot of different parameters, many variables, right? And I think I heard Google's AI has 1.5 trillion parameters or something.
Wow.
In the model. It's very hard to be precise about, you should do this or don't do that. They use different methods for what they call pre-training and post-training. But if we don't actually put certain guardrails around how this stuff is done, then it could end up very bad for us. And I am worried about that over the long term. But given that you're not going to stop it, let's figure out what we can do as users to protect our own privacy as long as possible, and see how this stuff all compares. I think Tom did a little bit of preparation and research here to say, let's look at 3 different AI engines. There's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, and there's Claude, which is from Anthropic. And we'll look at how they collect data, what they do with personal data, and other aspects of how the models and the companies treat your personal information. Any notes to start with, Tom? Things that you're feeling?
Yeah, I guess I had to want to mention that I feel that this is very much like the infancy of social media when we talked about social media privacy policies and how nobody reads them, or they've never used to read them. Maybe more people read them now, but I feel that a lot of people have not even taken the time to read, say,
Yeah.
ChatGPT's privacy policy, because the allure of putting in that prompt and getting an answer
Yeah.
kind of overwhelms it's very attractive to just jump right into that.
Yeah.
And why
It's
would I
so
even
easy
bother?
to use.
Yeah.
It's very tempting, right? To just
Right.
put in your info and
It's-
get going, right?
It's just like social media, very addictive. The algorithm is designed to get you to stay in their application. And
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, AI is like that. It's that new thing that I think we just we just want to skip over the potentially bad stuff of what's going to happen to our data and just jump right to the good stuff.
Oh, I know. AI development or research has been going on for 40, 50 years, I think. And we've had expert systems, we've had all kinds of different focuses, but I think it's the whole generative AI initiative where we're getting the large language models, which are really focused on text-based interactions and predicting what you could want based on what your prompt is. But there's also the deep fakes and deep fakes, video and audio, that are also classified as generative AI. And it's a whole new realm. And we hadn't seen anything in the AI world sort of progress very quickly until ChatGPT was announced. Do you remember when that was, Tom?
Oh my gosh.
How long ago was that?
A long time ago?
It doesn't seem like that long ago. It was
No.
in late 2022.
That's not long. No.
Not long. Yeah.
It's a lifetime. Though.
But I remember when I learned about it was probably around December, January 2023, when I first started to hear about it. And I thought, I should just try this thing. So going in to register for ChatGPT, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I got to put in my phone number. It actually asked for your mobile number. And I thought, I don't want to put in my cell phone number into this thing.
Yeah.
So I actually used VoIP for my home phone. So I went in and created a new SMS number, a new mobile number that's just for that. And I used it. That's being a little bit anal about the privacy part of it. But it is something that either you're really aware of it as you go in thinking, is it going to use everything I type in? Or you just go in saying,
yeah,
I don't care. Like Kevin, he publishes everything about himself. So he wouldn't be too upset about doing that.
True.
But so what we're going to do is we're going to compare the three engines across a few different categories and make some commentary, maybe tell some stories. But we're going to look at the data collection and usage between ChatGPT, Gemini, and Anthropic. Do you have any way of summarizing this, Tom? Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to just go through it?
Maybe we just go through it. But I think one thing to keep in mind is that they all do the same thing, but then they do it in different ways. And I think it's good to just think of the overarching systems that are in play here. Like I bring up Gemini, which is Google, essentially. And because it's Google, they follow along with your Google account. Because you
everything's
have to have,
consistent with how Google does their
Correct.
policy stuff.
So just keep that in mind as we go.
Yeah, and ChatGPT, and I'll refer to Claude as
Yeah.
the AI engine from Anthropic, but ChatGPT and Claude are a little newer, a little more independent, right? They can do things in a maybe more intuitive way as far as if you're thinking about privacy for an AI engine. But they all collect personal information to some extent because you need to do that in order to manage the users, right? What are your user preferences? So when they say, yeah, we collect personal information, that's the minimum that they're going to collect, obviously. But OpenAI or ChatGPT says they use the data to provide and improve services, and they may use data provided by users to enhance their models, but users can opt out of the data being used. That sounds fairly reasonable. I always key in on the opt-out thing, which means by default, you're opting in too.
Yeah.
So, but it says to improve Gemini, a subset of conversations is selected and automated tools help remove user identifying information before review. And these samples are reviewed by trained reviewers and kept up for up to 3 years separately from your Google account. That sounds good. But what's the risk that they don't actually follow this precaution. Do they have any history of not really following what they say, Tom?
Maybe a little bit. And there's lots of examples of whenever there is a trained reviewers. Is that another company, like a third party, like Amazon has used for their Echo Alexa review? Then that third party has access to that data. There's all kinds of questions I would have there.
Yep, for sure. And then with Anthropic's Claude, it collects personal data to provide and improve services. So that could be as little as what you talked about, managing user information. Their privacy policy outlines the types of data collected, and it retains the information for as long as it's necessary. So no big surprises there. But what I like about Anthropic and Claude is, as I mentioned, Dario Amodai, he's actually been a very outspoken advocate of security and privacy and putting guardrails on AI. In fact, when you go to Anthropic and start to look at what Claude is, in their privacy policy, right, the first thing they say is Anthropic is an AI safety and research company working to build reliable, interpretable, and steerable AI systems. Interpretable is a really interesting word because interpretability is a term that they use specifically within their research to say, how can we figure out how the engine came to this result? Which is really hard to do if you don't put some explicit tools and instrumentation in place, because there's so many variables, as we talked about, right? And so interpretability is one way of kind of auditing what the engines do. So they're already working on that kind of stuff, which I really like. As far as I know, and actually, in fact, I found it later on as I was preparing for the show, they don't use your inputs to train the system. Somewhere in one of the notes that we had collected here, Tom, it actually said that they do use user input to train, but on their website, in their privacy policy, it says they do not use user input to train. What they do is they do pre-training and they do post-training. In fact, they say for consumer offerings, data retention aligns with these purposes. Publicly available information via the internet. So anything that's publicly available, they can suck in and use, right? Mm-hmm. Data sets that they obtain through commercial agreements with third-party businesses. They may be buying data, but that's not data that you are putting in explicitly. Data that our users or crowd workers provide, and data that we generate internally. But it says we will not use your inputs or outputs to train our models unless your conversations are flagged for trusted safety reviews. So if you're doing something questionable, then they may dig into the data that you're putting in or getting out. And if you've explicitly reported the material to them, for example, feedback mechanisms. So after every prompt, you get results. It says, how did you like this result? And do you want to put any comments in? So they may use the information you put in about how you felt about the results as a way of training the system. So what they call post-training. And otherwise, if you've explicitly opted into them to use inputs and outputs. So it's pretty explicit, I think, on the Anthropic side as to what they're using and for what purposes. The other thing I really like about them is their privacy policy very much aligns with the GDPR user rights. There's, I think, 7 principles or 7 user rights that are typically talked about in GDPR. And then they address each one of those things explicitly about how they actually do that. So again, I think more points for Anthropic on that. So Google, of course, Gemini, we know they're going to, unless you tell them not to, they're going to use pretty much everything you put in. I'm not as familiar with ChatGPT's policies, and I haven't heard as much, but I think what we've generally found is they're probably better at allowing users to control and making it easier to control what they do with your data.
Yeah. Interesting. I think one of the other areas I think we wanted to talk about was data security.
Yes.
Right? Because I think in terms of like, how is the actual data protected, and compliance aside, right? Of course, compliance is going to be more of the checkbox, but things like data encryption, the standard controls around strong password authentication, 2-factor, I think that's interesting as well.
Yeah, I think so. I know that from what I've read and seen with Anthropic, they do have some well-defined security measures that they put in place. They document everything. again, I think there's a lot of thoughtful caution put into Anthropic's implementation. I've actually heard them referred to as the DuckDuckGo of AI engines, which DuckDuckGo is the privacy-oriented browser, so it tries not to collect or abuse data. It's something I am starting to look at more carefully.
I think that's a good niche for Anthropic, actually, because I look at them a little bit like Apple in a way of Apple has definitely focused a lot more on privacy in terms of they are always emphasizing the privacy controls that they have around their different features and their iPhone and the hardware associated with the software. And I see them as also finding that niche because I don't see Gemini or ChatGPT or Copilot or others really talking about what are they doing about privacy and what controls do they have in place, because the rest of it is all about features. I can't tell you how many times I've seen ChatGPT videos of them sitting around this coffee table and like pointing your camera at this object and then we can actually see it now. And it's all about these features and about the tech. But I think we have to emphasize the privacy and security that goes along with these systems. And I applaud them for doing that.
So there's a little bit of, I think, buzz in the industry too about, I think it was OpenAI. A bunch of people have left there who were in the function of the ethics and privacy side of things, right?
Yeah, there's been all kinds of movements. I think that was mainly around ChatGPT, but I've seen that kind of in the industry. It's a hot topic, and there's engineers and other people that are being shunned away or they are giving up, that they see what this could mean for society, and they are taking a stand by quitting or in some cases being fired. So.
Yeah, there's something else I want to mention too. Anthropic actually has a chief ethics officer, or I'm not sure if that's the title, but her name's Amanda. I can't remember the last name, but she's actually on this 5-hour podcast. 3 hours of it is Dario just talking very intelligently and in layman's terms, like not a lot of technical terminology. And he used to work at OpenAI as well. So he's been through a lot of what's going on in the industry. And he speaks very clearly about his concern to make sure that everything is done very securely and with privacy and safety in mind. They specifically say safety because eventually this stuff is going to be controlling systems, right? And we have to keep that in mind. And so I really like his view on that. But Amanda is in charge of their ethics, and she's got like a background in philosophy and now learned how to code and is now heading up their initiatives, which is really cool, I think, from that point of view. They talk a lot about their methodology called responsible scaling policy, which is everything that they do as they expand the capabilities of learning is to do it responsibly. That's something I think that is also really important within the industry. Dario actually wrote a really interesting, I guess it's an essay. He said it was going to be an all hands message, but it turns out to be like 40 pages long.
Oh, gosh.
But it actually does a really good job. It's called Machines of Loving Grace, which is a poem from decades ago. I think there's a band called that as well. But it's a really interesting essay about the positive side of AI. And he felt he had to write that because he had been so focused on the risks and trying to make sure that AI is done responsibly. But you have to have a forward-looking view of this to say, what do we need to do to make sure that we get the most out of this technology? And to start with, we have to say, what do we do? What do we hope to get out of it? Everything from biology and biological research and health to economics to governance, all kinds of different areas that he's focused in to say, he's not an expert in any of these areas, but he can see where AI is going to change each of those sectors of industry. And it's going to affect everybody eventually. But from a concern for the human work, meaning of life and all this stuff, there's a lot of people questioning it. But when you look at it, you can say, can we do this in a way that allows us to work together with the AI technologies in good synchronization, essentially? And one of the things that he says is going to happen is in the next 5 to 10 years, about 40% of the workers' skills in an organization are going to be changed by AI, typically by accelerating the time it takes to do particular parts of your job by 5 or 10 to 100 times. So imagine some part of your job gets accelerated by 100 times. But
Wow.
How does that change your job? It should allow you to have more freedom to do higher value things and more strategic things, right? And that's what we're aiming to get out of AI, really, so that people can do more with the time they have. A good analogy that he used was the days of printing and publishing, right? So go back 500 years. What was it like if you really wanted to publish a book? You had to think about the thoughts. You had to write them down with a quill, probably,
hard.
with an inkwell and whatever,
Yeah.
and hard work. And then, oh, geez, you want to distribute it? So you got to write it out how many times? And maybe you have to hire people to do the writing for you. But then the printing press came along, right? And all of a sudden, the publishing part of it got really easy. And now you could focus more on the creation and writing itself. And then with typewriters and word processors, that became very fast, right? You could just send a file to the printer and you could type stuff. You could fix your mistakes very quickly. But now you can publish a blog post in seconds. So all of that lets us focus on our thoughts and the higher value things that we're trying to get done. So if you look at it that way, I think there is a lot of promise with AI. But I am still worried about the bigger governance issues and the concentration of power that it could create. So that's the big picture that I think about in this. But from a privacy point of view, how these things are using our information is still important. And we are going to be using this stuff, whether it's as a chatbot or if it's going to become part of some machines or technology that we're using that speeds up various parts of it. Doesn't really matter. We just have to make sure we understand how it's being done.
Yeah, great points. This is a great topic. Very interesting.
It is.
And we'll have the links that you had mentioned, Scott. We'll link the different privacy policies that we talked about and then the podcasts.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you have a spare, 4 hours?
4 or 5 hours. You can do it on two times speed. Actually, you can't do that because Dario speaks pretty fast. So.
Yeah, so
3 hours of compressed knowledge.
If you're on like a long airplane flight or a long drive, probably.
I listened to it on the treadmill. I listened to it when I was doing my Christmas puzzle and all this stuff.
Yeah. Find the time, but we'll link that for everybody. But fascinating topic and one that is going to be discussed for a lot more in the future.
Yeah, we're just getting started, right?
This is just getting started. You're absolutely right. So I think that's all we have time for today. But thank you, Scott. This is a great topic. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay private. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to get your podcasts. Visit sharedsecurity.net for merch, previous episodes, and more. If you'd like to help support the podcast, join our Patreon to get ad-free episodes and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.